Okay, so it's lesson 8, part 2. We're back. We've got our little add to cart form showing. I also want to change this link here. So right now, this link, our product names are linking to the same page. So what we actually want, and Justin, you had mentioned showing like additional data, like the product description. I'm not sure if we actually have a description, but we want this to go to the product detail page. We've already got that page when we scaffolded our products controller. So I want to change this link to call the product details page before we write our add to cart method. So up here on my line 12, we've got a link where we're displaying the product name. So in my controller, instead of going to the shop controller, I'm going to change the ASP controller to the products controller. And I'm going to change the action to the details method. So we didn't write this method, but the scaffolding automatically created it. And this method is going to accept an ID parameter. I'm going to save that change. So we're changing controller to products and action to details. And then if we can try this link and see what it gives us right now. It's going to give us a working product details page, but we're going to want to make a few changes to it. So I'll refresh my cart here. Refresh my browse page. So I've made changes to line 12. The controller is products, and the action should be details. So we do have a few cleanup items we could do, like changing our button color, adding a placeholder image. We're going to leave those for now. If we've got time, I'll clean them up at the end of class or maybe next week, if time allows. So now when I click on a product, okay, notice our product detail page, it's secured. We've made it so everything in the product controller, you have to be logged in to access. So we want most of the product methods and views to be private, but not this one. Because our product details, it's going to be a read-only page. Users can't actually change a product. All they can do is see the product. So how could we make it? How do we fix this? So that we can click on one of these product names and load the product details page even when we're shopping anonymously. Notice I'm not logged into the site here. You got it, Liam. We can go to the details method of the products controller and we can override the authentication rules for the details method. So let's do that. Let's go to our products controller. So we've said only administrators can access everything in here. We're going to override that just for the details method. So my details method starts on line 34. Yours is probably a similar line number. Another easy way to jump to it is just click this little drop down at the top right. It shows all the methods in the controller in alphabetical order. So I'll just click on details and it jumps me here. So I want to allow anonymous just for the details method. For index, edit, create, and delete, all of those are administrator functions. But I'm going to add allow anonymous in square brackets just above my details method. Save that change, and then I can go back to my browse page, to my shop as a customer, and click on a product, and it should load the product details page for me. Okay, you know what? I may have discussed doing it in class, but I guess I never did it in my copy. So now I'll try it again. I'll click on one of my product details links. And it should load our product details page. So here's our page. So we should add, so Justin, yeah, you mentioned the description. Often the descriptions don't appear in the main page, just appears on the details because product descriptions can be really long. And a really long description won't look great here. So we click in here. So this is functional, but we should make a few changes here. What things should we change on this page? I can see at least 3 to 5 things. Yep, we want to get rid of the edit link for sure. Yep, we can actually keep this, but right now it goes to the product index, which we're locked out of. We want it to go back to our browse page. So we will modify the link. Yep. What else should we change to kind of clean this page up? I can see 3 other things we should do. Okay, right, we've got this. So what should we do with the photo instead of showing the file name? Yeah, let's actually display the photo as an image, right? Yep, Justin, Liam, Farouk, you guys all have it. So let's show the image. I can think of 2 other small things we should do. One is kind of aesthetic, a UI, and one is a functional perspective. Yeah, let's basically replicate our little add to cart with our quantity form. We should be able to do it from either place. Great suggestion, Diana. What about the headings on the page? Page titles. How's that looking? What could we do to kind of clean that up? We could, Diana, you like them? Liam, you want to get rid of them? I suggest we modify these a bit. Yeah, Maggie, I like that suggestion. Liam, that's fine. You can go minimalist. I'm going to combine these into a single heading. I think having the page heading is still useful, but up to you. Okay, so let's open up our views product details. You guys have suggested, highlighted all the changes that I agree we should make. A few are cosmetic and a few are kind of functional. So let's go to our views, products, and details. So I'm going to make a few, so I'll make the cosmetic changes first. First on line 4, I'm going to change the heading to say product details. And I'm going to do the same thing in my H1 on line 8. I'm then going to get rid of lines 11 and 12, my H4 tag, and my horizontal rule. Actually, maybe I'll keep the horizontal rule, but I'm going to get rid of the H4 tag. Now says product details. Whoops. This is optional, but we're cleaning it up. So change the title on line 4, change the heading on line 8. I'm going to go down to the bottom and we'll deal with those links at the bottom. Next. My edit link I'm going to get rid of. And I'm going to change this tag. We basically just want to go back 1 page in the browser history to the list of products for the selected category. So I can just use a little bit of JavaScript. I can link to JavaScript : history.go -1. This will take us back 1 page in the browser history. Yeah, Diana, I'm going to make this, the admin doesn't really need the details page because admin has an edit page already. So the details page isn't really of any value. If the admin wants to edit, they can just click edit straight from the index. So I'm converting this from an admin page to a public page for the shoppers. Okay, so here's our link at the bottom. I'll just throw this in the chat if you want it. Have you used this JavaScript feature before of calling JavaScript on a link without a function? Just a bit of a quick and dirty way to do it. We could put it in a function and call it. So if I refresh, my page title and heading should get cleaned up. Our edit link should, and this little pipe symbol, this separator should get removed. And our back to list will just take us one page back to the list of products we were looking at on the previous page. So my headings are better. I click back and it just jumps me back to the list of products we were already on. Okay. So let's check if we have an image, let's display it. And then we also want our add to cart form. So our photo gets displayed here on line 29. So I'm going to add an if statement here inside my data definition tag. So we'll say at if model.photo does not equal null. I'm going to take out the HTML display for that was there. So if we have a photo, we will display it. If we don't have a photo, nothing's going to show. So lines 29 to 32 replaced what was inside that DD tag. Pretty big. Maybe for now, I'll just make it a thumbnail. I know my thumbnail's pretty small. That's okay. I'll just shrink it down and show the small image. I know it's sort of small, that's okay. So I'll throw that little if statement in the chat for you. So when we've got a photo, we'll render it with an IMG tag. If we don't, it's just blank. And now I'm going to copy our little add to cart form from our browser. You're going to copy that in and maybe just reformat it a little bit. Okay, I'll leave the code up for a minute. If you need me to pause again, just let me know. If you're a bit behind or you need some of the code, you need to see something else, please just let me know, no problem. Once your product details page is looking okay, yes, Stephen, thank you. Yes, thanks for checking. I appreciate that. I am. Did not want to have to redo 15 minutes of video. But we're good. Thanks. I appreciate that. So go back to your browse page and let's grab the form. We'll paste it into the product details page and then we'll just manipulate the formatting a little bit so it fits better. So just copy the form as it is. And I'm just going to put it just at the bottom of our primary div here. We'll add the form. So let's see how this looks now. Okay, it's not bad, but what I think I want to do is use Bootstrap. I want to style this label so it's got the same, it's bold like these. And I'll push the quantity and add to cart buttons over to the right. So I'll just add a few classes to the label and button. So inside my label, all of these are call SM2. So I'm going to do the same. And maybe I'll actually take out my control label class in this case. My button, I want to offset it by 2 columns. So I'm going to pick offset SM2. That should push my add to cart button over to the right. I've just changed the class on my label and on my add to cart button. May have to adjust this a little bit, but we'll see how it works. Oh, okay. I do need push my label back to the left. So I still need control label here, but now these are aligned properly. I'll put that control label class back. That should push it back over to the left, I think. Okay, well, I'll leave it for now. It's not quite how I want it, but I can survive with it. Okay, so now we can add to cart from either page. Again, yeah, it needs a little bit of cleanup. I'll live with it for now. Or we can go back. So now we need to get into kind of the guts of today, the heart of the logic for today, which is writing our add to cart method. So our add to cart method, we're going to take in, we need the quantity, and we also need the product ID. So this tells me there's one thing we missed in our add to cart form, which is we want to store the product ID in a hidden field. So when the user clicks this add to cart button, we have both the quantity as well as the product ID. So I'm going to add that to both of my forms. So inside, put it at the bottom. This is on my product details. I'm going to have an input. Name is product ID. ID is product ID. The type is going to be hidden. So users don't need to see this value, but we need it to process the add to cart request. And our value in this case, here's going to be our app model.id. So this has got to go, this is in our details form. We won't actually see it. But if we look in our HTML source, we'll be able to see the product ID. See what this looks like. So go back to my product details. So I've added line 53. You can see it in my Visual Studio editor. It's kind of highlight, got a bit of a gray highlight. So we don't see the product ID, but if I view the page source, inside our add to cart form, here is the product and it's got the correct product ID here. We'll need a similar input on our browse page. Because when I go here, if I add to cart, I still need to keep track of which product did the user pick. So I'll leave this code up for a minute, and then we'll jump back to our browse page, and we're going to add a similar input. Just the value we're referring to is going to be slightly different. So add what I've got in line 53 to product details. It's in the chat for you as well. So I'll go back to browse, and inside my form, again, I'll create an input called product ID. I'll give it an ID of product ID. The type is hidden. And in this case, remember, we're inside a loop. So we're going to refer to our current product as p.id. So everything is the same except this value. On our details page, we only have one product, so we refer to that product with the variable model. In this case, we're looping through a list of products in our model, and we're calling each one, we're giving it the name of P. So this got to go in between our opening and closing form tags. So there it is for our browse page. I'll just check and make sure these IDs are getting inserted properly here as well. So I'll refresh my browse page and view the source here as well. Want to make sure those product ID values, even though we can't see them, that they are embedded in our individual add to cart forms. So here's my first one. Product ID is 4. Seems to be okay. Product ID is 12. And product ID is 11. And this is embedded, it's inside, it's in between my opening and closing form tags. It can't go after or out or before. It can't go outside those form tags. Or when we click add to cart, we're not going to know which product the user clicked on. So it's vital that we have a product ID here. So now it's time for us to start to write our add to cart method. We've set up a cart model to start a class today where we could accept a product ID and accept a quantity. We can get the current date and time. We'll also have to figure out what's the current price of the product and who the customer is. So let's go back to our shop controller now. And we're going to write shop add to cart. So this is good. This method uses post because when the user clicks add to cart, it's going to post that little form. So we're going to create a new method called add to cart. So our add to cart method, when we call add to cart, we need to pass in 2 values. What 2 values do we need from our form to save this item to the database? We're going to have 2 parameters in this method. Yep. Okay, it's not the product name we're interested in. Yeah, it's the quantity and the product ID. So it's the product ID. So remember, look at our cart. Our product ID is our foreign key, and we need to know the quantity. The other things we can figure out programmatically. So in here, we're going to declare two parameters. Both are going to be integers, a product ID and a quantity. And these are case sensitive. They match the names of our inputs in our little add to cart form, right? We've got two versions of the add to cart form. In our browse page, we have two inputs, quantity with a capital Q, and our hidden one, product ID, also with a capital P and capital I. In our details view, we've got two inputs, again named quantity with capital Q and product ID, capital P, capital I. So both of these forms are calling the same method. The user can add to cart from either place in our site. Oops, got an extra pair of brackets here. So first we want to get the current price of the product. Oops. So we can use the product ID to query the database and find out what is the current price at the moment the user clicks add to cart. So we can call find and pass in our product ID. So we're not querying all the columns, we just want the price value. And we're going to stick that in a variable. So now we're going to create, we're going to start to populate our new cart object. So we're creating a new instance of a cart. And now we can start populating some of the values. Our product ID is going to be equal to our product ID parameter from up here that comes from our form. Our quantity is also going to come from our form from the quantity field, whatever the user entered in that little numeric input. Our price is going to be equal to the price value that we queried from the database on line 44. Now we also need the current date and time, and we need to know who the customer is. Now the customer is going to be a bit tricky because right now we're anonymous. If we were logged into the site, it would be easy. We can identify the customer's email address of anybody who's logged in. So we're going to kind of fake it at first, and then we'll come back to this a bit later. So we'll say customer ID. For the moment, we'll just put this in as test customer. And then our date we can use the built-in date function in C# that will give us the current date and time. So this creates a new object for the selected product with the quantity the user entered at the current database price. We're just going to fake their identity for now, and we're going to timestamp it at the current date and time. So once we've created this new object, how do we actually save it to the database? We've used scaffolding to write this code for us. We haven't actually written our own code to save before. So we create a new object, and then we use our database connection, and we want to add to the carts DB set. And then to save to the database, we just call context.add save changes. So when line 58 runs, this actually saves to the database. So we'll try this code out in a minute, and then we can look in our carts table in the database. What should happen in the browser if this code is successful? So if the user adds something to their cart properly, what do we want to do next? We've got an error right now because we haven't really finished the method. There's no return statement. Okay, we could display a message. Yep. That would be one option. What else could we do? And that would be a fine option. If you're shopping online and put something in your cart, what do you typically expect to see? Yeah, right. And I think, right, Diana, Liam, I think, Maria, you mentioned it earlier. So we can redirect the user off to a cart page where they can see the current contents of their cart, where they could then remove, keep shopping, or check out. So let's redirect to show the current cart. We haven't used a redirect before. There actually already is our redirects in our application. I'll show you where. So here we're creating new data, we're adding, calling save changes, and then we want to redirect. We've actually already got similar code in our scaffold. So if I go to my products controller and pull up, let's say, the create method, where we create a new product, right? On our HTTP post, what happens? We call add, save changes, and then we redirect to the index method. So we're going to do something similar. We're going to return, instead of returning a view, we're going to call a redirect to a new action that we'll call cart. Now this action doesn't exist yet. So I'm going to run the code this way and see if it saves to the database. It should crash here and say there is no cart method. That's okay. If we get down to here, it means all of this code for saving a new item to the carts table is working. So for now, we'll just start this way. So here's the entire method for now. It's not complete, but it's a start. Look up the price for the current product. Create a new cart object and populate the product, the quantity, the price, who the customer is, which we're faking, and a timestamp. Save to the database, and then call the cart method, which is going to then load a cart view. So we don't have this yet, but I want to try this code out and see if anything actually gets created in my carts table. So if I query my carts table right now, it's going to be empty. I want to try the add to cart methods on both our browse page as well as our product details page. Yes, Diana, it will redirect the user. Different sites work differently. Some sites show a dynamic cart on the current page. We could do it. It's too complex for the purposes of this course. So for our course, we're just going to redirect to another page. And many sites still do that. Some have a dynamic pop-up cart, but others are still going to redirect you when you add to the cart. So right now, my carts table is empty. So let's try it out. I'm going to try and add two different products to the cart. I'll try one from our browse page, and then I'll try the second version, try calling the method again from inside the product details page, because we've got this add to cart feature in both places. So I'm going to add one Last of Us game. Okay, it redirected me to the cart, so that's a good sign it didn't crash. I'll execute my query again, and now I've got quantity 1 for my product ID, timestamped now with the current price. So that method seems to work so far. Obviously, this is going to be an issue we have to deal with. What about if I go into the product details and try and add from here? So I'll get 2 of these for the 2 basketball fans in my life. I'll hit add to cart. And now I've got 2 copies of product 12. So our add to cart is actually working so far. Oh. So here's the code. I'll put it back up. The other piece we've got to deal with is this. So we've got 2 different scenarios about our customers who are shopping. Right now, I'm shopping as an anonymous customer. If I was logged in, it would be easy to identify who I am. We have access to the user object when users are logged in, and we can access who they are using their email address. But when a customer is anonymous, like I am now, that's a little trickier. So how could we tie together? I'm shopping right now as an anonymous customer. So I want anything I put in my cart to be tied to me. I don't want every item to be separate. Yet at the same time, if we're all shopping together on the site and we're all anonymous users, we need some way of separating whose cart belongs to, whose items belong to which user. So how could we keep track of that? Yeah, we could use a session. So we do want to use a session variable. Absolutely. But then how could we generate an ID? Yeah, exactly. Good idea, Diana. We can generate a GUID, a globally unique identifier for each session. So if we don't have the customer's email address at this point, they're going to need an account and they're going to need to log in to check out. But most sites don't make you log in just to shop. So we want to do the same. So we're going to need to write a function that checks. We basically have 2 scenarios. Is there already something in the cart? If so, we're just going to tie the customer to the session. But if there's nothing in the cart yet, the user's putting their first item in, we need to use that GUID class to generate some kind of unique identifier and store it in this person's session. So if they keep putting more items in the cart, all those items are linked together and attached to this user. So down below my add to cart, we're going to write a little function. We'll call it get customer ID. Okay, so we're going to use the session. So is there already a session variable holding an identifier for this customer? So we haven't used sessions before. The session object is part of the HTTP context.session class. So that's how we reference it. And the session object, it's got a get string, excuse me, and set string method. So get string when we want to read a string value from a session variable. Set string we'll use when we want to create a session variable of type string. So we'll call get string, and we'll call it maybe customer ID. So if this is null, In this case, cart is empty, user is unknown. So in this case, we need to now use a GUID to create a new ID for this person. They haven't logged into our site, and they're putting their first item in the cart. So in this case, so let's initialize a customer ID variable as an empty string. Use a GUID to generate a new unique identifier. So now we're going to use set string. Whoops, I'm sorry. Pardon me, we got to get the GUID first. GUID. So this generates a unique identifier and stores it in a variable. Now we want to store the new identifier in a session variable. So now we're going to call setString. We're writing a new session variable called customer ID. Whoops. We have to do it this way. So we're going to set a string. We're creating a new session variable called customer ID, and we're going to pass in the GUID we're creating on the line before it. Actually, we can make this method okay. And then lastly, we want to return our new session variable. So we want to send it back so we can now use this new value when we add to the cart. If our customer ID is not null, we don't need to do anything. We just send the existing session variable back. So the first time the user puts something in their cart, this code is going to run. If they add any more items to the cart, well, the next time our session variable won't be null. We're just sending back the existing session. So here's our method for now. We'll add the permutation later. What if the user's logged into our site? For now, we're going to assume people are generally going to shop anonymously. They're not going to log in when they first come to our site. So now we can change the code in our add to cart. So instead of tagging our cart was a test customer, we want to call this method first. So before we do this, we want to identify the customer. So I'm going to create a variable called customer ID. And this is where we'll call our method. We'll call our get customer ID method. And then instead of hard coding the customer ID as test customer, now we can use our session variable that we're creating down below. I realize this is a bit complicated, but this is our only choice unless we want to force people to log in order to shop. And if we do that, we're going to have a lot fewer customers. Because people want to be able to browse around, put things in their cart, look at the price before they commit to creating an account and signing up. So I'm going to try it and see what happens. I'm going to save this code. So I've modified this section of my add to cart. Before we create a new cart object, we're now going to call our new get customer ID method. It's going to look if we already have a session variable for our customer. If we don't, we're going to create a new session variable for our customer. And then we're going to send back the customer ID here. And then we can use this value when we save to the database. I'm going to try this out. We'll see what happens. We're going to have to do a little more with it, but let's just see what happens right now. I'm going to try my page again. I don't expect this to work quite yet, but we're sort of doing it in phase. I think there is going to be one more thing we're going to need to do. So now I'm going to try to put something else in my cart. Actually, I'll put and now I get this. Session has not been configured. So by default, it's important to note in .NET Core, sessions are not enabled by default. We can't just read and write session variables. We actually have to tell our application, we have to turn session support on. It's off by default. So we'll fix this. We just need 2 quick lines of code to fix this, and then we'll take a break. Okay, so if you get this error, session has not been configured, well, you've done everything properly. So where do you suppose we would have to go to configure sessions for the whole application? What file are we configuring our application in typically? Same file we were in before reading week when we configured our Google and Microsoft authentication. Where did you have to set that up? Okay, Maggie, yeah, we did. You're right. We did in app settings.json, but where do we have to put the C# code? Right. You got it, Marie, in the startup file. So that's also where we have to configure. We just need 2 lines of code in startup in order for the sessions to work. So let's open up startup. We'll do that quickly and then we'll take a pause. So I'm going to go to my startup file. And in my configure services method, I'm going to put it here before we enable controllers with views. Enable sessions. So I'm going to add services dot add session. So we need this here. We need to add session support in configure services. And then in the configure method down below, we need to run the use session command. So we need it in both places. Add sessions in configure services. And then I'll just come down here. And before we map our endpoints, I'm not sure it really matters where we put this. It did in earlier versions. I don't think it does in .NET Core 3. So we're going to call app.useSession. So up here, it's add session, services.add session. Down here, it's app.useSession. So I'm just going to hit refresh and try to repost my form. This error should go away now. Yep, sure, Liam. So here, that's inside of configure services. So notice now my error goes away. So we cannot use session variables in .NET Core 3 unless we enable session support in startup. Microsoft, they disabled a lot of this stuff to make our templates lightweight. Rather than adding a whole bunch of stuff which we may or may not use, they want us to manually add in the components that we need. So if we don't need session support, those lines are not there. Okay, it is 12:58. So I'm going to push the latest code. I know we did a fair bit in the controller. I'm going to push up to GitHub now, and we will take a break. We'll come back at 10 after 1, and then we can build our cart method and use scaffolding for our cart page. So our add to cart is pretty much functional now. Okay, I'm going to take a break here. I'll be back shortly. Any of the code you need, it is now just pushing up to GitHub. Be back soon.